Good morning, everyone. I will do formal introductions in a moment, but I'm Martha Sapp, the director of the Green Acres program, and I want to thank you for being here this morning. It's nice to see so many people. Before we get started, today's presentation is being recorded. We will be posting the record of this meeting, and we held a similar meeting yesterday, and those recordings will be posted on our website along with the questions and answers that people asked. Yesterday, we had an issue, and I'm not sure if people are facing it today, where you might not have access to the chat. And we're not sure why that is exactly. Someone suggested it might be that those people who don't have the app for Teams might not have access. But I just want to let you know that we'll have plenty of time for questions. We're going to be asking that you submit your questions in the chat, but if you don't have access, don't worry. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end. Just take note, and then we'll circle back. Hopefully that isn't the case here. If there's anybody who can't see the presentation, there is something on the screen. Obviously, if you're calling in, that doesn't count. But if you're in the meeting in Teams but you don't see the screen, please let us know. That should not be happening. So as the slide shows, we're recording the presentation, and I will be monitoring the questions in the chat as we go and answering them there. But then again, at the end, I will read those questions for those who are either by phone or can't see it, and we will go over the answers then. So there's also plenty of time to check with us. The purpose of today is to hear from you. We asked you to send us comments before the meeting. We're going to take all of your comments today. We will let you know how to get in touch with us afterwards if you have more comments, even if it's about things that we don't cover today. If this sparks some suggestion you have, please share that with us. We will be at the League of Municipalities conference, available to talk to you, and we will be having workshops that we'll mention later on. Again, it's very important to us that we hear from our partners about how we can do our work better. So when you're asking your questions, if you can keep them to more general things, anything project specific, we ask you to reach out to the project manager who handles your area, and we'll let you know who that is later on. And if you know of anybody who could benefit from this particular recording, please let them know that it will be on our website, hopefully by Monday. So a quick review of Green Acres. We do two things. We preserve land and we build parks. Our state land acquisition staff buys land directly from landowners, and it becomes part of our system of state parks, forests, wildlife management areas, natural areas. We also have a very talented group of GIS specialists, financial whizzes, surveyors, appraisers, planners, who support Green Acres and our partners in all the things that we need to do, all the due diligence that's required as part of any park development or land acquisition project. But today we'll be focusing primarily on the local and nonprofit assistance program, where we give grants and loans to local governments and nonprofits to do land acquisition, park development, and stewardship projects. But one other note, we've had a recent reorganization here in the DEP, and the group that used to be part of us, Legal Services and Stewardship, they are now part of a group called Public Land Compliance. They're still doing the same thing, so no one's allowed to divert their parkland, but it's just they're in a different section. So as part of that reorganization, the Green Acres program is now part of a group called the Community Investment and Economic Revitalization, and that's under Elizabeth Dragon, the Assistant Commissioner, who I believe is in the audience today. Again, I am Martha Sapp from Green Acres, the director, and leading us through today's presentation will be Cecile Murphy, and expertly working the slideshow behind the scenes is Amy Sumaski. So Cecile and Amy are project managers, and they've been doing this for decades, and they very well may manage the projects in your area. So we have a lot to cover. We want to leave plenty of time for questions. So we can begin now. Cecile, take it away. Cecile, you're muted.
Typical. Sorry about that. So thank you, Martha. Thank you all for joining us today. We're excited to have you guys participate. Just launching in, our primary goals for today's meeting are to, first, we want to share the changes that we're planning that we hope will help all of us preserve more land and build more parks. The items we discuss will affect all of our different types of projects, our acquisition projects, including standard and planning incentives, our park development projects, stewardship projects, and the urban parks program projects. Not all changes are going to affect all types of projects, though, and we'll try to make that clear as we go along. Our second main goal is your input. We want to hear what these changes mean to you. We work for state government. We don't work in municipalities, counties, or nonprofits. You guys are the experts in letting us know how these changes are going to affect you. And just a quick clarification before I move on. When we refer to applicant in the presentation, we're referring to applicants for new projects, but also for supplemental funding requests, for example, planning incentives. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? First, we're going to do a brief discussion of the program reassessment we did recently, how we identified ways that we can do better, and our plans for making that happen. We're also going to briefly talk about legislative and policy developments that have popped up since our last funding round, and we'll talk about what's next. So we're always looking to see if we can do a better job. We normally tweak the program between each funding round, but recently we decided to do a more in-depth review, kind of a deep dive of the local and nonprofit program. And there were a few reasons for this. First, we'd received quite a bit of feedback from applicants and from project managers here at Green Acres with suggestions during the last few funding rounds. And we also have had, as I mentioned, some new policy and legislative developments. And finally, we have had steadily increasing application numbers. In 2014, we had approximately 60 applications. And in 2021, we had 2.5 times that number. At the same time, we have fixed staffing. So we're, wanted to do some problem solving around that issue and came up with some ideas. So during our review, we asked ourselves, how can we better achieve our mission, support our partners, respond to emerging priorities, and maximize our return on investment? And it is a significant investment. These are the funding figures for the last 4 funding rounds, including the anticipated funding for the upcoming round, or 2023 round. As you can see, we anticipate awarding an estimated $120 million this round. Just a couple of notes on these figures. The urban parks figure, that column that starts in 2021, that's a separate set aside that the legislature has added to the budget in the past few years. Green Acres has consistently and continues to consistently make significant investments in urban parks with our funding. So that's that first column. Second, the figure for the Jake's Law program, I'll talk about that a little later. But that figure, that 15 million, may change based on demand. We're sort of, it's a pilot program and we're playing it by ear. Okay, so during our assessment, we looked closely at what works and what doesn't and identified 3 primary ways we can improve. The first is better applications for higher quality projects that are more likely to succeed, a faster and fairer application process, and more timely project completions and expenditures. We identified ways that we can help our partners, that's you, submit better applications for the types of projects that the public wants and needs and that we want to fund. We also want to emphasize our focus on achieving multiple public goals with Green Acres funding, and we'd like to see this reflected in the applications we receive. So our first idea for achieving this goal is a longer application period. We normally have an application period of 6 to 8 weeks between the time that we announce the funding round and when the applications are due. This upcoming round, it'll be 3 months. So hopefully that will give applicants more time to plan and the result will be better projects. Our second idea is better guidance and more support. So, we've always prided ourselves on being a very customer service oriented government agency, but we can do better. So we are going to be doing virtual recorded workshops for applicants. We used to do this, but with COVID and everything, we sort of pulled back, and now we're going to be doing it again. So, except this time they'll be virtual and they'll be recorded. So hopefully you can attend, but even if you can't, you can still watch it. We also really want to stress that our technical support is always readily available. We have a number of project managers who are waiting to answer your questions. And it can be anything from, big stuff like discussing project ideas to, more medium stuff like, could you please proofread our enabling resolution before we take it to the council, which actually we would love to proofread your enabling resolution, just as an aside. The tips for submitting a successful application. So we're actually going to include this as part of our application package. We are anticipating that our program is going to get more and more competitive. And we want applicants to know what we're looking for. We don't want it to be a mystery. We want to be completely transparent on that topic. On that same vein, we also are going to have a grounds for possible ineligibility section to be, again, transparent and give everybody a heads up on, what kinds of applications won't make it through. And finally, we're going to have a greater emphasis on meaningful public engagement. And what does that mean? So in the past, we have just required a public hearing for our applications. But we've found that the best projects happen when the applicant has actively engaged with the community about what they want early in the process. So during park design or setting acquisition priorities. Meaningful public access starts with outreach and, again, transparency. This is an example of just a great example of meaningful public engagement in the planning process. So this is a park in Perth Amboy City. I got this because I'm on their listserv and their emails pop up, so it was an email blast. They conduct a resident survey. So you can see on the slide, there's a QR code, and you click on that, and then it takes you to the resident survey. And they also hold an open house for people to share their ideas of what they want to see in their park. The city then takes this community input, incorporates it into their park designs, which results in parks that match the needs of their residents. And you never know what kind of input you're going to get. This is a wonderful park design with a roller coaster, which unfortunately we don't fund roller coasters, but just to give you an idea. So beyond getting good applications, we want to help ensure that our partners can be successful with the projects that you want to pursue and we want to fund, and that success will come in a timely manner. And a big part of this is applicant capacity. And the first step is financial capacity. Does the local government or the nonprofit have sufficient funds to make the project happen? We are going to be listing our anticipated funding award amounts in our application, again, in an effort to be more transparent. And this will help help our partners plan so that you can have a real solid idea of what we're going to be able to provide for your project if funded. Now, again, these numbers aren't set in stone, they're anticipated numbers, but our funding round caps don't change that much from year to year. So it's a pretty darn good idea. So we encourage you to base your project on that amount and not to submit a project that would be contingent on receiving a supplemental funding in a future round. And that's particularly true for park development and stewardship projects. If it's a really large project that you're anticipating, and you don't have the matching funds to make up the difference between the anticipated award and the total project cost, don't apply for the whole project. Apply for just one phase. Pick a phase, pick the improvements that are most important, design phase 1 and submit that as an application. Then once that's complete, you can, in the next funding round, go ahead and apply for phase 2. We are going to include in our application a list of other potential funding sources, just to help you maybe beat the bushes and find some of those matching funds. And finally, we're going to ask for CFO signatures on our application to confirm the numbers that are in the enabling resolution, which includes the available match. On the nonprofit side of the program, we work with a number of extremely competent, capable nonprofits that do multiple projects with no problem. However, unfortunately, we have had multiple instances when nonprofits we have funded have folded. So we are going to be asking extra questions in our application. So we are going to have something called the Eligibility Certification Checklist. And the good news is that is going to replace some of the application submissions that we've required in the past. Another change is that we are going to require, at the time of application, demonstrated compliance with IRS federal tax exemption rules and the Charitable Registration and Investigation Act. those compliance requirements have been, those aren't new, but sometimes people have sort of straggled in later with the, demonstrating compliance. So those items are, nonprofits are going to have to demonstrate that at the time of application in order to be eligible. Another important capacity consideration is an applicant's ability to handle multiple projects, so project management resources. Experience has shown us that projects linger when applicants become overextended, and it's hard for most applicants to handle more than 3 open projects. So we encourage you to carefully consider what you can realistically handle when you're deciding whether to apply or how many applications to submit. And I'll talk more about that in the next slide. We are also instituting a policy focusing on 1 park at a time to help applicants and Greenacre staff focus on the most time-sensitive projects. For existing and new planning incentives and regional nonprofits as well, the focus will be on 1 active parcel at a time. This is going to allow us to efficiently allocate our staff reviewer time, which is a bit of a premium, and so we'll prevent review delays and give better customer service. And we understand that acquisitions don't always move in a linear fashion, but what we really don't want is to be asked to review multiple appraisals, so appraisals for 2 or 3 different properties at the same time, when really only one of them has a chance of moving forward, in a timely fashion. On the park development side, we're focusing on 1 location at a time. So we have had multi-park projects in recent rounds, and those are projects that involved improvements at more than 1 park location. But we are going to be eliminating those projects and focusing each park development project and application on 1 project site. We're doing this because mostly the multi-park projects have not worked as intended. Since 2014, we've actually only had 1 project that created multiple parks before the next funding round. So this is going to help focus our applicants and us on those park development projects that are ready to move forward. And then for the next one that you would have incorporated into the multi-park, apply the next round. And another reason that we wanted to do this was for fair project ranking. When an applicant applies for multiple park improvements, improvements in multiple parks, the ranking gets done based on both of the parks. But if they only do 1, then that ranking was not accurate and it wasn't fair to other applicants in the same round. Right, also new this funding round is that there's going to be 2 reasons why a local government or a nonprofit will not be eligible to apply. So there's 2 categories of ineligible applicants. The first are applicants who have 3 or more open projects. So that this is the capacity issue I talked about in the last slide. And when I say projects, I mean acquisition, development, stewardship, urban parks projects. I'm not referring to planning incentive parcels. So if you have, say, for example, 2 open acquisition projects and 1 stewardship project, that would be 3. The second category of ineligible applicants are applicants that have significant stalled compliance issues. So applicants must be in good standing with our compliance folks. Now, both these categories of ineligible applicants can still apply for supplemental funding for, particularly funding that's going to help make an open project happen. They cannot, just not a new project. So new project applications will not be allowed. And those applicants that are facing this situation will be notified next week and given time to close out the projects or resolve the compliance issues. And since there's, quite a few months between now and the application deadline, a lot of folks who get those letters will be able to do that, and then we'll be able to submit an application. Even if you don't get a letter, if you have a stalled project, we want to give you a heads up that we will be sending out more warning letters for particular projects. We want to make sure that all the funds that are out there are being used, and if not, we can cancel them and reallocate them in the next funding round. In the instance that you can't resolve issues before the funding round deadline, we do anticipate we're going to be having annual funding rounds. So take a break this round and, it'll give you a chance to resolve your open projects or compliance issues and then apply in another year. Okay, we also want applicants to submit applications that have a fighting chance at receiving a funding award. This was unfortunately an issue for the Urban Parks program in 2021, which was the first year that we accepted urban parks applications. We received 69 of them and only funded 13. So that was less than 20%. And that was a number of local governments that had put time and money into preparing applications and were not successful. And we really want to cut that down and focus the eligibility and the efforts of our applicants to projects that are likely to be successful. So this year, the funding is similarly limited with a $500,000 cap, which is what we had last year or last round. We can fund approximately 20 projects. The criteria last round was in order to be eligible to apply, a municipality had to have within its borders an overburdened community. The project itself did not need to be in the overburdened community, however. We are changing the criteria so that projects are eligible if they're located in or easily accessible from an adversely stressed overburdened community in an urban aid municipality. And I can define those terms in a minute. But I just want to emphasize again, it has to be located in the adversely stressed overburdened community in the urban aid municipality. And it can be easily accessible from. And when we say easily accessible, we mean within a quarter mile of easy access, no highways in the way, nothing blocking pedestrian access to the park. Okay, so some definitions. Overburdened community. These are definitions that come from the environmental justice movement and the EJ law and from our EJ office here at DEP. An overburdened community, and this one's from the legislation, is a census block group. So this is an important definition aspect in that it is not in a municipality, it is just a particular census block group. And that census block group must meet some minimum percentage of one of three things. Minimum percentage of low income, minority, or limited English proficiency residents. Adversely stressed, and the OBC criteria was something that we incorporated in our last funding round. Since then, there's been a refinement of the EJ law definitions, and they've introduced this term, the adversely stressed overburdened community. Adversely stressed overburdened communities are those that are higher than the 50th percentile for total environmental and public health stressors. These are stressors such as sources of air pollution, contaminated sites, solid waste facilities, sources of water pollution, so things like that. Okay, so here's a visual of the types of communities I was talking about. The light green municipalities that are highlighted are those that contain at least one overburdened community. The dark green are municipalities that contain at least one adversely stressed overburdened community. And those municipalities that are outlined in red are urban aid municipalities. So those communities that are eligible for the urban parks funding this round are those that are dark green and outlined in red. And I'm just going to add the reminder again that the project must be located within the overburdened community, the adversely stressed overburdened community in that eligible community. So, okay, I'll talk more about that as we go on. All right, our second major area of improvement that we identified was primarily speeding up our application process. We noted that it can be, it can take some time once we've received the applications to get to the approvals. And we really wanted to tighten that up. So with that aim, we identified the factors that slowed down our application review time and came up, excuse me, with solutions that will have the most impact. So again, I'm just going to do a side note that when I say applications, I don't just mean new applications, I also mean the requests for supplemental funding. So the number one thing that will help us move forward quickly are complete applications. And to make this happen, we're going to, again, have a lot of technical support available. Call us if you have questions, if you're not sure, or email us. Just let us know so that we can clear it up so that you can submit the application the way it needs to be submitted. We're also going to simplify and clarify our application package. We're going to make it easier to read and easier to follow. And finally, we're going to have detailed instructions in the application package for each deliverable. And that will just make it very clear how to do each thing that you need to submit for the applications. The good news for the application submissions is that we are no longer requiring paper copies. Everything can be submitted digitally.
You just muted yourself, Cece. Right after you said. Okay.
I don't know how that happened. I'm sorry. Did I get through the complete application section?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the next major way that we identified to speed things up was firm application requirements and deadlines. Unfortunately, we really pride ourselves on our flexibility, but sometimes it comes back to bite us. And this is one way that we have been flexible about people, sometimes submitting some things after the deadline. And we realized we really can't do that and have an efficient, fast application review process. So all applicants must submit complete applications or supplemental requests by the deadline. The public hearing timing and requirements also must be met, and the minutes must be submitted by the deadline. So we have let some applicants submit their minutes afterwards, and that is not going to be allowed anymore. So when we get the application, everything has to be in it in order for it to be eligible. On our end, we're going to be increasing the number of staff reviewers. Our applications tend to clump, particularly in the park development team, and we're going to be developing application review materials and trainings for the rest of Green Acres staff so that we have a broad base of reviewers to speed that particular part of the process up. So our hope is that we'll make things clearer for you, which makes things easier for us, which hopefully will result in good news faster. Okay, so the third major area of improvement that we identified is timely project completions and expenditures. So not only do we need to, make awards for wonderful projects, we have to ensure that the land is actually being acquired, the parks are being built, the applicants are being reimbursed, and our funds are being drawn down in a timely fashion. If this is not happening in a particular project, funding needs to be reallocated to other projects that are going to make it to the finish line faster. So our bottom line is we want you to succeed sooner so we can pay you sooner. So after the funding round approvals, we are going to work to address any potential delays early in the process. So potential delays tend to focus on things like environmental issues, recreation and open space inventory amendments, and compliance issues. And we're going to be, tracking these and paying attention to them all along the process so we don't end up in a situation where you're ready to close, we're excited about closing, but we can't because there's these outstanding issues. In doing this, we're going to take into account significant progress. So, for example, if you find contamination on the site, we're not going to pull your money if it's not cleaned up in 2 months. We understand that those things take time. And what we want to see is consistent progress. We want to see that you as an applicant are taking the steps you need to take to deal with the issue. The second thing we're instituting are firm deadlines for deliverables. And those deliverables take into account the project agreements, the technical documents, and closing documents. So when we're sending out transmittal letters, they will have a deadline in them. If that deadline is not met, we will move quickly to draft warning letters for the project. And finally, no major scope changes or location changes. Except for our planning incentive projects, our funding awards are given for a particular project that is ranked and competes against other projects in the same round. We strive to be flexible. Again, that really is something that we focus on, but with increasing competition for our funds, and when the ranking scores are really starting to matter a lot about who gets funded and who doesn't, we really need to be fair to other applicants. So the project you apply for needs to be the project that you go forward with. If there are minor scope changes, like for example, you're adding 2 tennis courts instead of 1, well, that's not going to be a need for a new application. But other, larger scope changes or location changes will absolutely require a new application, and you can submit it in the next round. Okay, so in addition to examining how we can improve, we also looked at how we can best respond to things outside our program that influence us. So legislative and policy developments. We took another look at how we can support DEP's priorities and support the department's efforts in key areas. We looked at the new legislation that affects green acres. And in some cases, applicant feedback made us realize we need to clarify and update some of our policies. So this is kind of a snapshot of DEP's priorities. I'm not going to read them, but basically they're climate change, resource protection, and promoting public health and healthy communities. For priority 1, climate resilience, we looked at how our projects can support that with a focus on carbon sequestration and reduced flooding. We're going to be providing resource information in our application for climate-friendly parks. So those are parks that include things like green infrastructure, significant plantings, things like that. We're also providing ranking points to projects that promote climate resilience and that meet the goals of an applicant's climate resilience plan. And on the flip side, we'll be subtracting ranking points for tree clearing. Finally, we have developed a new tree removal policy in concert with the DEP Division of Forestry. The tree removal policy is relevant for park development projects and stewardship projects. We want these projects to support the department and the state's climate resilience efforts, and carbon sequestration is a very important tool for fighting climate change. We have also received an increasing number of expressions of public concern and complaints about tree removal in Green Acres projects, so that also was the impetus for developing the policy. In regards to tree removal, our policy has always been that we won't fund park development projects that involve excessive tree clearing, but unfortunately problems have arisen because applicants haven't provided sufficient information about planned clearing to us or to the public. And I'm sorry, it's not all applicants. Some applicants this has been a problem with. Some of you are doing a wonderful job. Our application is going to require all applicants to provide detailed information about proposed tree removals in stewardship or park development projects. So details including information about trees that are greater than 6 inches diameter at breast height that are slated to be removed. We're also going to ask for an alternatives discussion, like what could be done instead of cutting down that tree. Could it be supported? If you have a straight walkway that the tree is in the way of, can the walkway meander around the tree, for example? These are things we have found in projects that we've administered. So these are all real life examples that I'm giving you. We're also going to ask that the Shade Tree Commission or the Environmental Commission sign off on the information. So they're not saying we support the tree removal, they're just saying that this is accurate information in the environmental impact assessment portion that deals with tree removal. We're going to ask applicants to adhere to municipal tree ordinances, even if they are exempt. And projects that propose significant tree removal are not going to be approved. We're not saying you can't remove trees because in many projects that is inevitable if you want to put in a facility. But public engagement is very important, and the project just might not be a good fit for Green Acres in certain circumstances. Okay, so for priorities 2 and 4, those are having to do with resource protection. We took another look at maximizing the ecological benefits of our investments. We already provide ranking points in our acquisition and development projects for things like meeting conservation and environmental protection goals, including conservation practices, native plantings, clean and renewable energy. So our major focus in this area was on refocusing our stewardship program. Our stewardship program provides funding for natural resource restoration and habitat creation. And there has unfortunately been confusion on part of both the applicants and staff about the project and some drift from its original program focus. So we have clarified which projects are eligible, which activities are eligible, and done a review of requirements. So the first requirement is do no harm to the environment. So we can't fund a stewardship program, a stewardship project that's going to, for example, add a trail, but where there is existing habitat. Next, we wanted to confirm eligible improvements and really delineate those. We broke them up into two categories. The first are those that are automatically eligible. They include natural resource restoration and enhancement, which includes creation, restoration, and protection of wetlands, meadows, woodlands, those things. And the second automatically eligible improvements are historic landscape restoration for properties listed on the New Jersey or federal historic registers. Examples of conditionally eligible improvements are, well, first, conditionally eligible improvements, that's our second category, and those are ancillary improvements for public access. That's their primary purpose. So examples are nature trails or interpretive signage. Those conditionally eligible improvements are going to be subject to a cap, and they must be part of a larger project that includes improvements from the automatically eligible category. We're going to review details in our workshops about these, and we're also going to have really explicit lists in our application packages so that hopefully all of our confusions will be a thing of the past. Okay, so for DEP's priority number 3, which is revitalizing communities and protecting public health, we focused on environmental justice, helping communities that have been burdened with a disproportionately high number of environmental and public health stressors. We at Green Acres have always prioritized underserved and densely populated communities. And now that the department has an environmental justice office, we are working closely with them to refine our approach. For example, as I mentioned before, this round, we're going to be focusing further on adversely stressed, overburdened communities. So we're increasing our outreach to environmental justice communities and organizations, and that's for workshops and, of course, the application round. We are going to be giving additional ranking points to projects that are located within, again, in the adversely stressed, overburdened communities. And we're going to be having incentives to create and improve parks where they're most needed. Now, those incentives are going to take the form of higher grant percentages. Now, we already talked about how the Urban Parks Program will be focused on adversely stressed, overburdened communities in urban aid municipalities. These incentives are for Green Acres funding, so a different pot, but the same idea. We are going to be enhancing funding to neighborhoods that need parks the most within the towns that need them the most. So specifically, we're going to be giving 100% grants for projects located in or easily accessible from adversely stressed OBCs in urban aid municipalities. And we're going to be given 50% grants for projects located in or easily accessible from adversely stressed OBCs in highly or densely populated municipalities. Now, as usual, we will be having lists of urban aid and highly and densely populated municipalities in our application package. And I'm going to say it again. I know I sound like a broken record, but we really just don't want any confusion on this, that the project must be located not just in a municipality that contains the adversely stressed OBC, but actually in the adversely stressed OBC itself in order to get favorable treatment. Okay, so moving on to legislation. The primary piece of legislation affecting Green Acres recently has been Jake's Law. Jake's Law encourages counties to build and manage completely inclusive playgrounds. The law was passed in 2018, but DCA adopted the regulations for Jake's Law this past spring. Accessibility has always been a concern for Green Acres park development projects. We require all parks to meet ADA requirements, and we encourage applicants to go above and beyond. And this round, we're actually going to be giving ranking points for projects that go above and beyond the ADA requirements. And most exciting, we're having a pilot program this round. We're going to be giving 75% grants to counties for completely inclusive playgrounds. Now, that is the completely inclusive playgrounds is capitalized because it is a very specific term with a very specific definition and very specific requirements that are set out in the DCA rules. We will, of course, be providing the information in our application package so that there's no confusion about what those playgrounds must include. Completely inclusive playground applications will not count towards the limit on the number of funding awards that an applicant can get. And I'll talk about that a little later. And I just want to point out this is a pilot program. It's counties only this round, and the whole program might just be for this round only, or we may extend it. We don't know. If it's extended, we may possibly expand it to include municipal projects. We'll have to see. Okay, so some policy issues that have come up since our last funding round that we are focusing on. One of them is outreach and planning. And we want to renew that focus on public outreach and planning, both for us and our partners. So on our side, we're having stakeholder meetings today and yesterday. We are doing increased outreach to environmental justice communities. And as I mentioned previously, we're going back to holding our workshops. Only this time, in addition to having workshops during the application period that are all about how to apply, we will be having applications after projects are approved for project management and project administration issues and topics. On the side of our applicants, we are asking for increased community engagement. So we are going to be providing clearer and new guidelines in our applications, and we're going to be requiring additional public engagement. We've received a number of complaints, unfortunately, from the public about a lack of community involvement in certain local government applications. And we're going to be asking all of our applicants to include meaningful public engagement, again, during the project planning stage. Just like I spoke about earlier with Perth Amboy, how they had the survey and they have a meeting, trying to get input while the project is still being planned. Public engagement must also include a review of potential project impacts, which is a section that's in the environmental assessment. So we're going to require that section be reviewed with the public. On the other side, we're making changes to make it easier for applicants to do the public hearings portion of the community engagement. We are still going to require a newspaper advertisement, but the timing of that is going to be the same as the Sunshine Law requirements. So we're going to have our 15-day requirement, but it's only going to be for the website, not for the newspaper ad. And, as always, we're encouraging comprehensive recreation facilities planning and of our applicants. And then on our side, we have a new planning initiative called Outside Together. Outside Together is an update of New Jersey's statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, or SCORP. We've done this periodically in order to get federal funding. And this particular round of revisions, we are putting a large emphasis on public and stakeholder involvement. The findings from this process will inform funding policies and acquisition development priorities moving forward. And our stakeholder engagement is beginning this fall with the convening of an advisory committee, and more stakeholder involvement is anticipated in the coming months. So we encourage you to get involved, and there is a website, or you can just go to the DEP website and search outside together, not outdoor together. Okay. Another department and Green Acres priority is ensuring public access to our open space and recreation resources. waterfront parks, water recreation areas, and access has always been a primary focus for Green Acres. But now we're actually going to be providing additional ranking points for municipalities that have a DEP approved public access plan, and extra points if it has been incorporated into their master plan. Public access plans describe a municipality's plans to enhance access to tidal waters. So this means that it is not just municipalities along the shore, these also any municipality that has tidal waters in its boundaries. More information on this can be found on the DEP website. Another public access change we're implementing is that all projects, including acquisition and park development, will be required to have meaningful public access immediately upon closing. And this is fee simple and conservation easements. We, of course, require public access to all of our properties, but there's sometimes been a grace period between closing and when that access is required. Unfortunately, that has not always come to pass in a timely fashion, so we are going to be requiring immediate public access upon closing. Finally, synthetic turf fields is a policy issue that it comes up periodically, and we periodically ask the Division of Science and Research in DEP to do research reviews. They recently completed a review of runoff and heat impacts of synthetic turf fields. And while they didn't find any compelling reason why we should not fund them, there were a number of concerns that came up. And so we will continue to fund synthetic turf fields, but we're going to require applicants to conduct a thorough review of due diligence considerations. And these include things like drainage systems, infill materials, heat impacts, long-term cost effectiveness, exposure risks. And applicants will then need to share their due diligence review with the public. And this is going to ensure transparency and public engagement. And finally, we're going to require a discussion of alternatives. Why is synthetic turf necessary in this particular site as opposed to natural turf? Okay, I want to sum up by reviewing the funding options available through our program this upcoming funding round. So there's basically 4 pots that applicants can apply from if they qualify. There's the Green Acres pot, which includes acquisition, park development projects, or rollovers from the urban parks pot. There's stewardship projects. The third are Jake's Law projects. And again, these applications can be submitted by counties. Finally, there's urban parks projects, and those applications can be submitted by urban aid municipalities for projects in adversely stressed, overburdened communities. And one thing we really want to clarify this round is that for each pot, an applicant can submit one request, and that request is either a new application or a supplemental funding request. Okay, I realize that we have covered a great deal of information in a really short period of time. The application materials are going to cover most of these topics in detail, and we encourage you strongly to attend our upcoming application workshops for more information. But if you have questions, please reach out to your appropriate Green Acres project manager, and this slide can show you how to do that. So you go to our website, which is the address at the top of the slide, and then you click on Contact Us, which is in blue here. And then you click on Staff Directory, which is highlighted by that beautiful red arrow that I spent so much time figuring out how to do. Once you get to the staff directory, just scroll down and there's a list of all the different project managers and the areas that we each handle. So I want to say thank you so much for attending. If you have additional comments, we want to hear them. They can be, again, about today's presentation or any suggestions you have for improving the local and nonprofit assistance program. Please submit those comments, though, by next Friday, October 7th, to this particular website, greenacres@dep.nj.gov. It's important that we get them before that date, because as soon as we've received them, we're going to review them and we're going to make final decisions and finish updating our application materials. I just realized I skipped a slide. So I'm going to zoom back here because this is important. This is what's next. So we're having our stakeholder meetings yesterday and today. And then this is the anticipated time frame for the upcoming funding round. We're going to be making announcements, we anticipate, on October 31st. Happy Halloween. We have tentatively scheduled workshops for applications on November 9th and 18th. And then our deadline will be anticipated to be February 3rd. Now, again, this is a 3-month application period. So you'll have all of November, December, and January before having to submit the applications on February 3rd. Okay, well, thank you again. And Martha will take your questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Cecile. There weren't any questions in the chat, but it is now open season. So if you'd like to ask a question, just please raise your hand. Or if you don't have access to the little yellow hand, just ask away. Okay, we have our first question. Richard Dodds.
Hi, Martha. Back again. Couldn't get enough of it yesterday. The question is, on when you described you will only be doing one parcel at a time in the application. If a property is multiple parcels, is that considered one project or one parcel? I would think so, but I just want to...
It is, yes. So for our, again, we're not talking in this question about the planning incentive for an application, because an application for a planning incentive is based on your open space and recreation plan. We are talking about as you pursue one parcel at a time through that, that's separate. But when you're applying for a standard acquisition or an urban aid acquisition, a unified group of parcels is a project. So that's okay. So we've had projects that are a greenway that you can apply for that as the project. But when you're going to do the appraisals, they're obviously separate. If they're separate owners, they're separate appraisals. If there are 15 of them that you've identified, we don't want you to be doing 5 at a time. It's too many appraisals all at one time. So we're trying to have you pace it correctly, because you can't necessarily or don't necessarily get enough money from us to buy all of it at once. You shouldn't appraise it all at once. The appraisals get backlogged. They also get stale if it takes too long. So the one parcel at a time is again to keep the pacing going. It doesn't mean if you're working on say a planning incentive project or a regional nonprofit project, it doesn't mean that you can't start a new project until you've closed on something. It's really mostly about the appraisals. We want to make sure that you're not, again, taking on too much at once. So you're gonna be working with your project manager very, carefully. And as you're making significant progress, then the next one can come online. It's just that we have a lot of instances where people have multiple appraisals going at the same time when they don't have enough funding or enough staff to manage those. So this is where we probably had the most questions yesterday and today. So we'll continue to answer questions about it. But again, it's mostly just to make sure that you don't take on more than you can handle at once, or put too much on us that our staff can't handle either at the same time.
Great, thank you. I think it was really about a single owner of multiple parcels.
Oh,
that
okay,
was the concern we had.
No, that's one appraisal basically.
I'll tell you what, I have more questions, but I'll put down my hand, let somebody else ask a question, and I'll put it back up again.
Okay, we have plenty of time.
Sure.
So Victoria? Victoria?
Yes, good morning. I think you have to unmute me. Can you hear me?
No, you're on. Yes.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much. It was funny and concise and understandable, so we appreciate that. The Urban Parks Projects Grant, can only a municipality apply for it, or can a county apply for it for a project within one of the applicable parks?
Yes, the county can also apply. It's location specific. So the
Okay.
project needs to be in or serve the adversely stressed, overburdened community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric? It says Eric Monberg.
I think that's Wendy.
Wendy,
Oh,
that's you.
Oh, sorry. Okay. You're muted.
Sorry, can you hear
That's
me
okay.
now?
Yes.
My husband uses my laptop and somehow he has gotten his photo in there. Yeah, so I just want to be sure I'm clear on the sort of one at a time policy. So in this next round, if there are, say, 3 or 4 parcels that we're at various stages of discussion with the landowner, we will not list all of them on an application. We will list only the one that we think is most likely to go or is really in progress. And then if we get far enough along with that, we can do something else vis-a-vis another one that's ready. I
Okay.
just want to, yeah.
Sure. Are you talking about a planning incentive, or are you talking about an open project where you're working on a large area? Because when we send
No.
out the oh, okay.
No, I'm just talking, so I'm speaking, in the context of a nonprofit application. And, in the past, you had this form and you would list on the form, you could, several properties, where you might be in various stages of negotiating with the landowner or making progress with the landowner. And what I'm hearing now is, now you just want us to list the one that's the most likely to go.
No, the supplemental funding request is what you're referring to, and we do want to know what you have in line, sort of. That helps us see whether or not the balance that you currently have is enough for the parcel that you are going to be able to buy in the next round. But it lets us see what's sort of waiting behind. So we still want to know all of it. What we're saying is that generally we would like you to appraise one at a time, because our experience has shown that most groups, most towns, counties, nonprofits aren't closing on multiple at the same time. It's sort of lining up anyway. So it's having all the have a bunch of appraisals come in at the same time. It just bogs everybody down. And it's, I understand it helps you negotiate because you get a value, but we can't provide a review service to you for a project that may never come to fruition over and over again. And that's kind of what's happening. We're having a lot of people who are using us. They've come to rely on us for that certification of market value, and then they might buy it on their own or do something else. And we've become sort of a service, and we really just don't have the capacity to do that anymore. So we're trying to focus you on what's most time sensitive. If you keep moving, you can go to the next one as the funding allows. It's really based on how quickly you can close and make progress.
So obviously then, thank you. I understand. Obviously, we can have appraisals done sort of at our own risk to help us negotiate or set a target for fundraising or whatever. You just don't want us to submit them to you.
Well, you bring up a good point. We have something called an at-risk authorization when someone needs to move ahead at their own risk. The problem is, and we're trying to balance this, we want to give you the instructions so that if and when you come back to us, the appraisals were done correctly. The guidance and instructions also require our appraisers' attention. Right now, we only have one full-time appraiser. We're bringing on a second, and we're trying to get more hourly appraisers. We're just in competition with the crazy real estate market right now. So we will work with you. Your project manager will work with you about those at-risk projects and the ones that you're working on, because it's the same group of people who are doing the review. So we'll continue to work with you on that. This is, we're making blanket statements here, but in all cases, your significant progress and your situation will inform what your pace is. So
Thank you.
Sure. Josh?
Hey guys, Martha, Cecile, Amy, great presentation, very informative, a lot of changes. Can we just talk about when you mentioned 3 or more open projects? I'm just looking for some clarification on that, and it's kind of a 2-part question. A, does that mean when you say open projects, does that mean projects that have been awarded but not started yet? Does that just mean projects that have shoveled to the ground but aren't completed yet? And then when you say 3 or more per entity, does that mean that, for instance, in Essex County's case, when we partner with nonprofits, do the nonprofits projects count towards Essex County's overall project?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So 3 open projects are projects that have a balance with us. So if there's still money in our account with you, it's still open, because that means that you're still working on it in some capacity, or we would have paid you. Sometimes it's just that you need to submit, not Essex County, of course, but somebody needs to submit all the closeout documents, and then we can pay you when it's done. So that's why we're giving you plenty of time until February to do that. If the project is done and you close it out, it comes off your list. In Essex County's case, as you brought up the example, you work with partnership projects, but the applications are approved to the nonprofit. So that actually helps you because they're actually responsible for doing the project, even though we know that you're working on it with them. So in those instances, we're looking at each applicant. If you have 3 projects, you're going to be open projects, you're going to be getting a letter from us next week, as Cecile mentioned, and it lets you know you can't apply for a new project. You could ask for more money for something that's already open, but you can't apply. You can't take on a new project if you already have 3 open ones. And then again, you'll be informed next week so that, and I don't think Essex County is getting one of those letters because maybe you're focusing on your nonprofit projects too, and that's helping you. So that these letters we don't want it to be a surprise to anybody. We're giving you plenty of advance notice. The stewardship issues, the compliance issues, again, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody because we're only sending the letters out to those applicants that have serious compliance issues that they're not making significant progress on. There are instances out there where someone has compliance problems, but they're working diligently to fix them. The letters will only be going to the ones where that's not really the case. So again, we're giving you plenty of advance warning so that you know that you have a lot of, something to resolve before the next funding round. So I hope that explains that.
Yes, thank you, Martha.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Richard Dodds, back to you.
Back again. I absolutely appreciate all the time and effort you guys have put into this, and thank you for taking my question. So the requirement for public meetings, I'm just trying to think about the timing on that. If you have if you have an announcement for grants and let's say it's in the 2nd week of a month, all right, whatever that month is, and your public, your elected officials meet the 1st week of the month. So then you plan a public meeting. You might get the planning started in the 2nd month, right? Because of the timeline of things. And the minutes, even if you held that meeting in the 2nd month, somehow, the public meeting, then you have to provide minutes, which won't be available to the next month. So the question is, can you make it in 3 months? Unless you're sort of going backwards and sort of saying, well, at one time we want to do this, and you start holding meetings, 6 months ahead, but not even knowing the properties and not knowing the funding. So I'm just curious how you fit that in a 3-month period.
Okay, so I think we're talking about 2 different things here. One are the public engagement meetings where you're doing the planning. Those can start right away. The public hearing is really the one, generally it's the one where you talk about what you've decided to do and tell the public all of that. And that would happen later in the process. So the public is going to be involved from the start in the way that we want it to be done now. So that isn't really reliant on the scheduling of your council meeting. We also have lots of applicants who hold special meetings for some of these things. So the engagement can happen early and often. And then the hearing is the one that's sort of more at the tail end where you're telling people what has been decided, what they helped you decide. And that, again, you can line that up so that because it's due February 3rd, you already know that you need to have the meeting and get the minutes in sometime in January to meet the deadline. So I think we do think that there's plenty of time to do the governing body hearing and then also the planning meetings.
And Martha, just
Understood.
to add on to that, a couple of things. The first is that the public engagement portion can start before any meeting of the governing body. That you're just getting ideas. You're not committing to anything. And the second is that the public hearing minutes that are submitted can be unofficial, and then you can follow up and submit the official ones later. So you could actually hold the public meeting a week before the application is deadline. And the public hearing a week before the application deadline, and then just submit the official minutes after the following meeting.
Can I kind of ask a clarifying question? This is Leslie from Mercer.
Sure.
Can you just use a, say, a court reporter transcript for the public hearing minutes, quote unquote, instead of waiting for meeting minutes?
Absolutely.
Because that's what we typically do.
Absolutely. We've had people send us in videos. Not that we really want to sit through them all, but absolutely. We just want to make sure, we want to kind of know as we're reviewing the application, which we want to start doing immediately upon receipt, now that they're going to be complete. We want to make sure that there weren't any, it wasn't public outrage about something. And if there were issues brought up, that you've resolved them, that you talked them through and the public is okay. Because we get lots of calls directly from the public who tell us, say there's stealth government going on out in their town and they don't know anything about this and they live next door, they were never even notified. It's going to be lights and traffic and all those things. And so we really want people to be involved way more often, way earlier and better. Someone asked the question, actually I just realized there's a bunch of questions in the chat now. Thank you, Cecile, for answering those. The question was how many meetings for public engagement are required? We're not dictating the number of meetings, it's quality over quantity, but we would like it to be very well communicated if there's only going to be one. Very well communicated so people can either attend or provide input in some other manner. But you can do it in different ways. Some groups have meetings, if it's a park development, they talk to the schools, they just do a different variety of outreach efforts. So we'll take I'll take Sarah's question, but then we'll read out the ones that are in the chat because not everybody has access to the chat, and I want to make sure that those answers questions and answers get shared. Sarah?
Oh, thank you, Martha. And I want to echo everyone else's comments this morning. This has been incredibly helpful and very illuminating. I just wanted to clarify a question. Actually, it's a couple questions about nonprofit applying for a Green Acres grant as opposed to the municipality. And our understanding is that there's nonprofit grants tend to be less than they are to municipalities. Is that correct?
It is correct because there's less nonprofit money.
Got it.
In most cases, but it's actually it grew, I think, to a larger degree when the corporate business tax ratios changed last time. So there's more development, more nonprofit money, relatively speaking. Yeah. So we were able to increase our nonprofit awards last year, make grant larger awards.
Okay.
But there is less money available.
There is less money. And will those amounts be in the application, or will we find out what are funding awards amounts as we go through this process?
Well, we're going to put in the application what the awards have been in recent rounds. Okay. So you kind of have an idea of what it might be. We can't guarantee it. It's all about supply and demand. Right. We always tell people you want to make sure your application is great and you want to hope that everyone else's applications are terrible so that we don't know exactly what it will be until we get everything counted, all the requests counted up.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that's helpful. And then we also understand that there will be a management agreement letter in order to be awarded funding. And can you explain a little bit what that is?
I'm not sure what you mean by a letter. In the application, an applicant for park development or stewardship project needs to either own the land or have the approval and support of the landowner and have the legal right to do the project. So we have a lot of instances where someone will come and apply for something, a nonprofit on municipal land. We need the municipality or the landowner, whoever it is, to tell us that they're they're okay with this, that they will enter into a 25-year lease, or in some cases, management agreement, because we don't want to approve something and then have the landowner say no. We also want to make sure that we don't fund something that gets built and then the landowner takes it out, you know. So that's why we need either a lease or a memorandum of understanding or agreement with the landowner, between you and the landowner.
Got it.
Okay.
Great.
So
Thank you.
Sure. We have a couple questions in the chat. Cece, I think you answered those. Do you want to read them out? Just so everyone knows what they are.
Sure. So Sam from Hudson County asked about their normal public meetings are at 5:30 in the evening, and our public hearing requirements have been that the public hearing happen after 6. And he was asking if there's going to be more flexibility. And I answered that we have a few applicants in this position, and what we tell them is to go ahead and have their public meeting at the regular time, but hold the public hearing at 6 o'clock. And the newspaper advertisement, or now the website advertisement, should just specify that the meeting starts at 5:30, but the public hearing will be at 6.
As background, just so you know, this was something that came about because we didn't used to specify, and then we would find out from a lot of people that people were holding hearings at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when people couldn't attend, and so that was sort of disingenuous. You really can't reach the public if it's only in the afternoon. Some things are better now that most meetings are virtual, but we just found that for things that involve the public, after work, typical work time is most fair to them. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. Alan asked, what are the maximum grants to our nonprofits in both the Green Acres and Urban Parks categories? And I explained, well, first, the nonprofits unfortunately aren't eligible for Urban Parks funding. But for the Green Acres, our maximum grants have varied round to round. It's funny because I said earlier that they don't change that much, but actually for the nonprofit projects, they have changed. Last round, we gave double the, it had been about 200, well, not about, it had been 250,000 for most rounds per applicant, unless it was a large regional nonprofit. And last round, it was 500,000. So I know that does make planning a little challenging because, that's a big difference between 250 and 500,000. And I don't know what to tell you. I would plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Maybe, submit one that has additional, at least on the park development side, additional facilities that could be omitted if the award's only 250. That would be one suggestion. Okay.
I just want to, if I can just go over one thing, we didn't talk about it here. Green Acres for the local program for grants to municipalities and counties. What we set up a long time ago to try to, again, get money to the municipalities where the most people live, we set up what we call a multiplier system. So every funding round, depending on how much money we have available, we set a base award. So a municipality that doesn't have a large population will get, let's just say, $500,000. And no one will get below that unless they ask for less. Highly densely populated municipalities will get 1.5 times the base award. Urban aid municipalities will get double the base award. On the county level, the more rural counties will get 2 times the base award. Densely populated counties will get 2.5 times the base award. And the super uber counties that have the highest number of people with Essex, Hudson, and Union will get 3 times the base award. So from year to year, the base award changes, but that multiplier system stays intact, and that really keeps things very objective. So that basically, depending on how many people are, what your population is, that you'll kind of know how much you'll get each round based on, as if you know the multiplier, the base award. So that system has been working, and again, it's resulted in more projects in the areas that need them the most. So do you want to keep going, Cecile?
Sure. So Janine asked if the questions in the chat will go into a frequently asked questions or be answered in the recording. Well, okay, so we actually are doing that now. And we are hoping to post the chat in on our website as well. And Janine also asked how many public engagement meetings are required. We're actually not specifying what type of public engagement has to happen. You know, I think that's going to depend on your community. You know, if a lot of people work and, you know, come home and do homework with their kids and have no time to go to a meeting, well, then a survey might be more appropriate. If you have an area that has more retirees, you know, then maybe, you know, a public meeting during the day would be okay. You know, it really depends on your community. And as you know, what we want to see is demonstrated public engagement. So you can hold a meeting, but if nobody comes, then I don't know how much engagement there has been. You know, if you advertise the meeting and you show us that, you know, significant advertisement of this meeting was made public and nobody comes, well, that's different. Or if you, I had one project last round where I just got a stack of emails that were submitted with the application all about the skate park. And it was clear that the public was very engaged in this project. So it can come in whatever form. We want the bottom line, not necessarily the means to the end. And Leslie asked, will this recording will be available for later viewing? Yes, it's going to be on our website. Okay, that was it.
Yeah. No, yes, we will put the questions from yesterday's session and today's together with the recordings, so you don't necessarily have to watch them both again. We'll try to put the questions out there. Are there any other questions? We have a lot more time. If you have Richard Dodds. You're muted,
You're
Richard.
muted.
Yes.
Sorry about that. Thank you again. Question about tree removal. If you're doing a trail we have a real problem with ash trees. Would dead trees be considered tree removal?
Yeah, we're very sensitive to that. And one of the things we're asking for in your discussion of the removal, if you're talking about dead or dying trees, hazardous trees, things like that, that's what you let us know that that's the reason. But as Cecile mentioned, she had a project where there was a straight walkway and they were proposing to cut down some very old, beautiful, healthy trees. And instead of just making the walkway go around them. And that is the kind of thing that when the public, in that case, and this is an important factor, it's not just the number of trees. We had one area, one park, where they took out about 6 or 7 trees, but they were the only trees there, and the neighbors went crazy, and they hadn't been told. So these are the kind of things that the calls that we receive, and to the extent we can, we say, well, you need to talk to the town. They're the ones who made the decision, but we're the Department of Environmental Protection, so we need to make sure that we are honoring the mission of the entire department in these decisions. So it's not, again, we're not necessarily just talking about deforestation. It can be just a couple of really great old trees that people grew up seeing, and there's not really a good reason to remove them.
No, I completely understood. I was more concerned about trees that were hazardous.
Yes, no, we understand that public safety is important, but
I will add, like for the dead trees and the hazardous trees, that we have had some applicants who've one in particular who just said, yeah, all the trees are dying. They're all dying. Huh. And, it's not that it wasn't clear that they weren't dying, but it was so sort of glibly asserted that we need some kind of backup for that. And that's why we're asking if it's a municipality, or even, if it's a nonprofit, the Municipal Shade Tree Commission, the environmental commissions, we're just looking for someone to sign off to say, yes, these trees are dying. And if it's a hazardous tree, we do ask in the alternatives analysis, can it be supported? Is there something else that can be done besides chopping down the tree? And if the answer is no, then the answer is no. It's not that we're going to say you can't ever chop down trees. It's just we want to be more thoughtful about it and, just have a little more confidence that if, for example, someone says they're all dying, that they are actually all dying.
Understood, and I think that's very reasonable.
Surprisingly, the tree expert report that we asked for from that town never appeared. The one that where they claimed after the fact they were all dying. So again, most municipalities, counties, and nonprofits are doing the right thing, and we know people aren't. I know people say you sometimes have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, but we're very careful about anything that can look like doing harm to the environment. So we're trying to be extra sensitive to that. So are there any other questions? We're not going anywhere, so. And so this is not the end of it. If something sparks, your curiosity, or you think of something afterwards, please reach out to us. If you have an existing project manager, you can reach out to them. If not, you can just email us at greenacres at
NJ Greenacres.
njgreenacres at dep.nj.gov. Sorry about that. And our website is njgreenacres.org. And our contact information is there too. So we want to hear from you. We really want to hear any suggestions you have for improvements that maybe we didn't even think of today. Please share. Okay. I won't keep you. I'm sure you all have things to do on Friday. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Martha. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So someone asked the question, is there a possibility for pre-application calls reviewing project proposals? Yes, please, if you're still on. Yes, please call us for pre-application discussions. Oh, good. You answered that, Cecile. Sorry, thank you.